Legislative and legal updates. Ms. Pearson on the legislative update.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Well, the 2-year legislative session is now in full effect. Actually, tomorrow, February 22nd, is the deadline for bill introduction. Because of that deadline, there's already been a flurry of bills in the last few days that have been introduced, and since I produced the report that's in your packet, so I expect more to come actually today, and then tomorrow we'll probably see a slug, and I'll be reviewing those and reporting back at the next meeting.
Better than a ton.
Water is definitely on folks' minds over in the Capitol, and while I focus here today on Delta and related statewide water supply bills, yesterday there were also a number of regionally specific water bills that were introduced, and I'll be reviewing those as well.
Yeah, there was either one or two or a few more bills on small communities in the Central Valley and the problems of poor water quality for
That's
small
right.
communities.
Groundwater contamination
Yeah,
and disadvantaged
right,
communities.
Right.
So a few bills of note. There's been a bill introduced on the Delta Protection Commission's consistency process and appeals process by Assemblymember Roger Dickinson of Sacramento. Mm-hmm. It's AB 183. It's one of the bills that I'm looking at. And of note, this bill would amend the Delta Protection Act, which is a 1992 statute that created the Delta Protection Commission and set forth state policy for protecting the primary zone of the Delta. Specifically, the bill as written proposes to amend the authority of the DPC and expand the discretion of the executive officer to determine project consistency with the Delta Protection Commission's land use and resource management plan. Furthermore, the bill would change the appeals process currently in place for the DPC. I'm going to be tracking this bill, like I said, and in addition, myself and Councilmember Patrick Johnston, one of the original authors of the Delta Protection Act, plan to meet with the bill's author to better understand the intent and potential impacts or implications for our plan and our consistency process. Another bill that you might be interested in that was introduced just last week is on Delta data sharing. This was introduced by Assemblymember Hueso of San Diego. It's number AB 378. Mr. Hueso is the chair of the Assembly Water Parks and Wildlife Committee. The fact sheet that was prepared by committee staff indicate that the bill is intended to ensure that decision-making in the Delta will be based on best available science by requiring that state-funded Delta research must be made publicly available at no more than an incremental cost. So I'm taking a look at that bill as well, and we're meeting with staff to better understand where they're headed with that bill.
Okay.
On the topic of the 2014 water bond and discussions about rewriting that water bond, a joint hearing has been set for next Tuesday, February 26th. That's co-hosted by the Senate Natural Resources Committee and the Senate Governance and Finance Committees. The title of the hearing is Overview of California's Debt Condition, Priming the Pump for a Water Bond. There's no agenda, at least at last check. I plan to attend, and I'll be reporting back to you next month on the discussions that they have.
There are at least 4 and maybe more bills that are, we call them spot bills. That's on right. Water bonds. So everybody's assuming some modifications will be made. Nobody knows what the modifications are yet, and everybody wants to get a piece of the debate.
Indeed. A key part of that debate is the state's debt ratio, and so I think that's what they'll be specifically focusing on at this hearing. On a related note,
Randy, just a question.
Sure.
Will that hearing be webcast?
Yes, I'm sure it will on the California channel, so I can get you that information if you're interested.
Please.
So related to bonds and state debt, we're still waiting to hear the latest and this month's report on state revenues from the Department of Finance and what that means for the 2013-14 budget year for California. As I reported to you last time, the revenues in January spiked and came in at about $5 billion above estimates, which generated quite a bit of interest, as you might imagine, given the last few years of deficit. However, the jury is still out on whether that's real money or just a spike generated by reaction to expected tax changes. And if that's the case, then we risk a complementary plunge in revenues in the spring, and it may end up being a wash. So,
When will we know more about that?
well, when I looked at the report yesterday, the report on January revenues came out on February 8th, so I would expect around March 8th, March 9th, March 10th we'll hear.
The analysis should be complete.
Yes, they do a monthly report out of the State Controller's Office and the Department of Finance.
Yeah, they do a monthly report. The legislative analyst will do a report that and do their revenue estimates, I think, in late March or early April, in advance of the governor's May revision of the budget. And then the May revision of the budget will have the Department of Finance and the governor's estimate of revenues. But if history is any indication, a lot of people would like to act as if the money is a permanent increase in revenue and therefore should be immediately spent on permanent tax cuts or permanent spending increases. And the best guess is we won't know for sure where, what caused it, how long it's likely to last. But
Yeah, and predicting inflows and outflows has not been a strength of the legislature.
No comment. So just on a last note, I suppose I should mention that the so-called sequester at the federal level is expected to go into place without immediate action by the Congress next week, and that's going to result in a series of across-the-board cuts, which are certain to have an impact on our federal partners, the extent to which is unknown at this point. Any questions?
Hank.
One half-serious question. When you use the word slug and saying we expect a slug tomorrow, you're not referring to that multi-celled invertebrate organism that we find in gardens that consumes things and doesn't do very much?
I'm not. More like a slug of water.
Like a large quantity?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Pearson.